Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Welcome to the first of the Sunday afternoon talks for 2024. So the theme for today is, can a person realize enlightenment? So I'll be exploring a few aspects of that theme, and people are probably familiar with the format. The initial Dhamma teaching is usually about an hour long, then we have a break for some refreshment, and then there's a time for questions and Dhamma dialogue after that. So the initial question, can a person realize enlightenment? It might seem that it's pretty obvious that, well, isn't that why we're all here? Isn't that the purpose of the Buddha's teaching, so that enlightenment can be realized? So that it might seem that there's no need to ask the question, and the answer is totally obvious. But the reason why this was suggested as one of the titles for the Sunday afternoon talk, and I thought, well, this is good to look at, because things are not so obvious, that the initial impression that we can have cannot be necessarily telling the whole story. So one of the things that Lumpur Sumedho would say many years ago, and still up to the present, he would say that in order to practice the Dhamma, we need to make a paradigm shift, to change the attitude from I'm an unenlightened person who's got to do something now in order to become enlightened in the future, to change that paradigm to being awake now. But then when we'd hear this, you think, well, I am an unenlightened person, Lumpur, and I have got to do something in order to be enlightened in the future. Yeah, what's wrong with that? And so you might be thinking that. And so that's the initial impression. That's sort of, in a way, where we start from. But if we take that as the ground of reality, then we're casting the whole of our Dhamma practice into the framework of being a person, identification with those personal qualities. And that's where the trouble begins, I would suggest. This is the issue really that is worth exploring in this respect. So to unpack the question a little bit, can a person realize enlightenment? What do we mean by a person? And how does the mind hold that? What do we take that to be that word to be referring to? So in this respect, it's significant that the very first obstacle to enlightenment, Sakkaya Ditthi, means the personality view. The etymology of the word, sa means true or real, kaya means the body or the person, view, ditthi is view, so the view of the real person. So that's the first obstacle to enlightenment, is that the belief that, I am the body, I am the personality, this is exactly and completely who and what I am. So that's fetter number one. That's the sort of first obstacle, and so that that kind of assumption, that everyday ordinary fact of I am a person, I'm a human being, and this is who and what I am, that needs to be challenged or explored. So and this is a way that Lumpur Sumedho would most often characterize what is meant by self-view or Sakkaya Ditthi. It's that thought, I am the body. I am the body. I am a woman. I am a man. I am old. I'm young. I'm 67. I am British. I am Ajahn Amaro. I am a Buddhist monk. I live at Amaravati. or those ordinary everyday facts, taking those to be absolute truths. That's the obstacle. That's the fetter, the samyojana. That we take those relative truths and take them to be absolute. It's also, I feel, very significant that the word person comes from the Latin persona. Per means through, sona is sound, so persona means a mask. That which if you wear a mask, it's that which the sound goes through. So an actor in Roman or Greek theatre, they would wear a persona, a mask. That's what they would speak through. So right there in the word person is the clue is that it's not an absolute reality. It's a mask. It's an appearance. It's a seeming. And so that the message or the clue, the indication is right there in the word itself, that we put on a persona. And if we look at our lives, we can see that this is really the case, without trying to encourage multiple personality disorder. Are you the same person in the workplace as you are with your family? Are you the same with your children as you are with your parents? If I'm with my sisters, I'm not the same person as I am with other members of the Sangha. As I often point out, my sisters do not relate to me as Ajahn Amaro. I'm their little brother, because that was the case for the first 21 years of my life and their lives. So that set of personae, if you're going to the doctor, you're a patient. If you are the doctor, you're the doctor. You're not the patient. You're a different persona if you're in the examination chair than if you're doing the examining. If you're a dentist, if you're the one operating, working on the teeth, you have one persona. If it's your teeth being worked on, you have another. So we're used to putting on and taking off these different personae through our days, but in our ordinary, manner of thinking, we create out of ignorance this sense of I am this ongoing, continuing individual, rather than seeing there are these succession of personae, different, aspects of what the mind identifies with and takes to be who and what we are, that come and go throughout the course of any day. So in the Buddha's teaching, the basic model, or the rough description of what we take ourselves to be, the apparent fabric of who and what we are, is what we call the five khandhas, the five groups of experience, which is a very rough division of body and mind: rupa, vedana, sanya, sankhara, vijnana. Rupa meaning material form, or the body. Vedana meaning sensation, feelings of comfort, discomfort, neutral feeling. Perception, sanya, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. Sankhara, mental formations, thoughts, emotions, memories, ideas, imagination, intentions, moods, different mind states. And then vijnana is sense consciousness, which each one can regard as the building blocks of all experience. And these are rough divisions. These are kind of a broad brush way of describing the world of body and mind. They're not super precise, philosophical definitions, but rather a kind of an easy way of slicing the pie of our experience into five pieces. And in one of the teachings in the Majjhima Nikaya, there's a series of questions and answers. The question is, feeling, perception, and consciousness, are they conjoined or disjoined? Are they separate things, or are they connected? And then the response is, they are conjoined, they are not disjoined. You can't really separate what is felt, what is perceived, and what is cognized. That which we feel, we perceive. That which we perceive, we cognize. You can't really separate them out completely from each other. But just like you can say that the temperature of the water is not the same as the viscosity of the water, or the flavor of the water is not the same as the temperature. but they're all aspects of the same glass of water. The temperature is not the same as viscosity, and the viscosity is not the same as a taste, but they're all different attributes of the same substance. So, not to get too technical, so this division into the 5 aggregates, the 5 khandhas, is a sort of easy way of dividing up the nature of body and mind. This is what we build up, that sense of I am this person, the idea of me as a person or somebody else. It's a mixture of rupa, material form, and then these mental aspects. So in that respect, and then talking about that first obstacle to enlightenment, the first of the 10 fetters, the 10 samyojana, self-view, then that's the challenge, or that's the task, is to change the perception around that. So rather than taking those 5 khandhas to be who and what we are, instead there's an exploring and examining of that. And this is what we use insight meditation for. Vipassana meditation is to, in a sense, to deconstruct that habit of taking the body and thoughts and feelings, perceptions to be completely who and what we are, is to look at that, I am the body, I'm the personality habit, explore that, to unpack that, and to see, well, how true is that? And if that has any validity to it whatsoever. Well, cut a long story short, with the practice of insight meditation and that the development of wisdom and awareness, then it becomes clear that there isn't any aspect of the body and the mind, these 5 groups of experience, that can really be said to be who and what we are. They can't be said to have an owner. And in this respect, there's a couple of teachings I like to quote that really defines the kind of significant distinction. So the Buddha's say method of meditation, particularly insight meditation, what is being done is that quality of awakened awareness is being, say, teased apart from the objects of awareness. So that this, like in this very moment, this in the mind, which is hearing the sound of these words, which is cognizing the meaning, which is seeing the shapes of myself or the shrine or the temple here at Amaravati, this awareness, it knows these perceptions, but it's not limited by those perceptions or burdened by those perceptions. It's not defined by those things that it knows. And so that teasing apart of this quality of awakened awareness and the objects of awareness, that's essentially the work of insight meditation, freeing the heart from its entanglements, its identification with what we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, think, that kind of insidious identification and attachment to the body, to thoughts, feelings, perceptions, our own story, our qualifications, our problems, our responsibilities, our hopes, our fears, our opinions. It's teasing apart, freeing that quality of awareness from those many and various patterns of our experience. So these 2 passages I like to quote, and many of you have heard me quote these over and over again, but I do feel these are extremely significant teachings. And if we really take these to heart, it really changes the whole way that we experience this life and our world. So the first one is a dialogue between the Buddha and a wanderer called Vacchagotta. So it's in what's called the Discourse on Vacchagotta and Fire. So Vacchagotta was a wanderer. He was a yogi, a sannyasin of a different group. But he kept coming along to the Buddha and asking questions. And there's many dialogues recorded in the suttas of Vacchagotta coming to meet the Buddha. I think we had one of the Sunday afternoon talks a year or two ago was the questions of Vajragota. And it's a kind of a long series of encounters, and it finally ends up with Vajragota becoming the Buddha's disciple and becoming an arahant. But there's a long series of encounters beforehand. So, in this particular encounter, Vajragota started off by asking the Buddha, what happens to an enlightened being when they die? When the life of an enlightened being comes to an end, where do they go? Is the first question. Where do they reappear? And then when he asks that question, the Buddha replies by saying, reappear does not apply. So then Vajragota asks, well, an enlightened being at the end of the life of their body, do they not reappear anywhere? Are they completely annihilated? Do they disappear? Do they not reappear in any kind of a realm? And the Buddha replies, does not reappear, does not apply. So, trying to be thorough, the Vajragota says, well, do they both reappear and not reappear? This being an Indian philosophical analysis. Both and the Buddha said, no, both reappear and not reappear, that doesn't apply. And then, just to complete the set, do they neither reappear nor not reappear in any realm? And the Buddha said, that doesn't apply either. So Vajragota's thinking, well, one of those must be true, because that covers everything, doesn't it? And then the Buddha makes this very wonderful analogy. He said, you're asking the question in a way that presumes a reality that doesn't exist. So, as an example, so say we had a little fire burning here, made of grass and sticks, and then we let the fire go out, and I asked you the question, where did the fire go? North, south, east, or west? What would you say? And then Vajragota says, well, I'd say the question doesn't apply. It didn't go anywhere, it just went out. And the Buddha said, exactly. The way you are asking the question presumes a reality that doesn't exist. Reappears doesn't apply, doesn't reappear doesn't apply, both and doesn't apply, neither nor doesn't apply. And so living being doesn't apply, going doesn't apply, place doesn't apply, time, location, identity, none of these usual benchmarks really apply. So then he goes on to the part of the discourse that I find very, very potent. Actually, I have it written out and pinned up on a little notice board in my kuti to remind me every day. What he says is, the Tathagata, the Buddha speaking about his own nature, that awake, aware quality embodied in his own life. He said, the Tathagata, one who tries to describe the Tathagata by referring to material form, that's impossible. That material form whereby one trying to describe the Tathagata would describe him, that's been cut off at the root, made like a palm tree stump, deprived of the conditions of existence, and made incapable of arising in the future. So that's been totally let go of, totally abandoned. The bridge is down. So that those sensations, that Vedana, those perceptions, the sanya, the mental formations, sankhara, vijnana, the discriminative consciousness, whereby someone trying to describe the Tathagata would describe him, that's been completely let go of, that's been cut off at the root, made like a palm tree stump, deprived of the conditions for existence, and been rendered incapable of arising in the future. So, with the Buddha sitting right there in front of him, then he's saying that any attempt to define this in terms of the five khandhas is incorrect. But here, the Tathagata is here. So face to face, and in the middle of this dialogue, he's saying any way of defining this embodied awareness, this quality, in terms of the five khandhas, our normal reference points, that doesn't apply. And then he goes on to say, the Tathagata is liberated from being reckoned in terms of material form, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, consciousness. He is profound, immeasurable, unfathomable, like the great ocean. So there's a quality there there's that, and I'm taking the Tathagata there as being a way of, in a sense, talking about the awareness of our own hearts, our own minds, not just this great being who lived 2,600 years ago, but it's really referring to this awake, aware quality that can be liberated in each of our lives, in these lives that we experience, saying that can't be defined in terms of the five khandhas, in terms of these personal qualities, but it's present, it's profound, immeasurable, unfathomable, like the great ocean. So that's one aspect of this. And so it's to the thinking mind, or to our ordinary everyday thinking, it's like, well, but they were having a conversation, there's two people sitting there talking. How can you say that, how can the Buddha say that what this is not definable in terms of rupa? You know, there's a rupa there. I feel this is one of those areas where it does take a lot of direct contemplation and reflection in our own meditation to look and see how this can be, how this works in our own practice, and particularly through insight meditation. So the second dialogue that I like to quote, and I feel is extremely significant, is with a Brahmin called Dona, D-O-N-A, Dona. And the story goes that Dona was walking through the countryside on a dusty path, and he saw the footprints in the dust, and he thought, what kind of a being made these footprints? They were human-like footprints, but they had these very distinct symmetrical marks, these very clear patterns made by the lines on the soles of the feet of whatever being it was that walked along there. And so he sees these footprints and goes, wow, what kind of a being made these footprints? This is extraordinary, these shapes of wheels and conch shells and so on and so forth. So he follows the footprints off the path into the forest, and there he finds the Buddha sitting under a tree, meditating. So he goes up in front of the Buddha, and there's this. It doesn't describe the detail of what he was experiencing, but the flow of the story suggests like he's amazed. There's this wow experience of what kind of a being is this quality of peacefulness and radiance and this serenity emanating from this being sitting under a tree. So he kneels in front of the Buddha and says, "Excuse me, but are you a deva?" Yeah. And the Buddha says, "No, I'm not a deva." And I said, "Are you a Brahma god?" And he said, "No, I'm not a Brahma." "Are you a yaka, a celestial demon?" And then he says, "Are you a human being?" And the Buddha says, "No, I'm not." Which is very interesting, since the Buddha is an arahant and incapable of lying, he cannot tell a lie. When asked, "Are you a human being?" Manusosi, which is the same thing we're asked in our ordination ceremony, Manusosi, "Are you a human being?" He says, well, the full version is, "That whereby I could be known as a human being has been completely let go of, completely abandoned." And similarly, that whereby I could be named as a deva or as a brahma or as a yaka, that's all been completely abandoned, cut off at the roots, made like a palm tree stump, deprived of the conditions for existence, and been rendered incapable of arising in the future. So he can't lie, and when he's asked, "Manusosi, are you a human being?" That body was born of human parents, King Suddhodana and Queen Mahamaya. They were the biological parents. But when he's asked, "Manusosi, are you a human being?" speaking from the place of truth, the Buddha says, "No." So to me, that's an amazing and wonderful thing. And similarly, when Ajahn Chah was asked once by a visitor to Wat Pah Pong, someone said, "How old are you? Do you live here all the time?" He says, "I have no age and I don't live anywhere." Yeah. If you have an age or if you live somewhere, then you're someone. As soon as you're someone, then there's suffering. So, and again, Luang Por Chah was known as an arahant, cannot lie. And then when he's asked, "How old are you?" "I have no age." And so in those moments, I would say it's really a Dhamma desana, a demonstration of Dhamma, or an embodiment of Dhamma itself, Dhamma which is timeless, which is unborn, undying. And so it's really the Dhamma speaking. It's really a Dhamma talk. And that's which is the effort, the intention that we have in place when we build these Dhamma talks. They're sort of labeled to Dhamma talks, but they can be they can be coming from a place of greater attachment than, say, the Buddha or Luang Por Chah speaking. So I feel these are really very significant statements, and they're pointing to this quality of awakened awareness, which is present, which is real, and which knows. It's this knowing quality, but can't be defined in terms of a person. It knows those personal qualities, but it's not defined or limited by those qualities. So then exploring this question or this issue, can a person realize enlightenment? I think one of the best ways of understanding it is how what we have in Buddhist practice and teaching and the kind of pedagogy of the Buddha and this way is we start from where we are. We start from the place of our everyday experience. So sometimes people wonder if they're joining in with the chanting here in the monasteries. Earlier this morning I was talking about the 5 subjects for frequent recollection, which we recite very regularly. And the first line is Jara Dhammomi Jarang Anatito, or Anatita. So I am of the nature to age, I have not gone beyond aging. Second line, Bayadi Dhammomi Bayading Anatito. I am of the nature to sicken, I have not gone beyond sickness. Third line, Marana Dhammomi Maranang Anatito. I am of the nature to die, I have not gone beyond dying. And so that's very much identifying with the body. And I am of the nature to age, to sicken, and to die. And that's starting from where we are, starting from the habits of self-view. The I am the body, I am the personality habit of thinking. And then later in the same session, in the same puja, we can be also reciting Rupang Anatta, the body is not self. Vedana Anatta, feelings are not self. Sanya Anatta, perceptions are not self. Sankara Anatta, mental formations are not self. Vinyanang Anatta, consciousness, sense consciousness is not self. So in the same puja, sometimes people think, well, hang on a minute, Ajahn. We just said, I am of the nature to die. And then later on, or even earlier, we're saying, the body is not self. So which one is correct? So I would say what we have there, and we find that many, many times in the teaching and the method of expression of the Buddha, is we start from where we are. We start from that place of attachment. Okay, this body seems to be who and what I am. But when it's explored, when it's recognized, when it's known as it truly is, then with a ripening of wisdom, then it's recognized this thing which is aging and which is subject to sickness and death, this isn't truly who and what I am. So you have what they call the 2 levels of truth. You have the Samuti Satya, the conventional reality, and then Paramatta Satya, or ultimate reality. And so that both of those are true. You can say, yes, this body is aging, and say, I'm getting older, we're all getting older. Yes, on one level that's true, but then it's also true that there isn't anything that is the genuine absolute owner of these bodies, that they can't truly and absolutely be said to be who and what we are. So that both are true in their own way. Just like we can say the sun rises in the east. Yes, that's no one would argue with that. That's our experience. The sun rises in the east, sets in the west. I was a little confused when I was in Australia for the first time recently, and the sun goes around the north at midday rather than around the south, which is not what you're expecting if you live here in the northern hemisphere. That the sun goes around, still rises in the east and sets in the west, but at midday in England the sun is to the south. In Australia, New Zealand, at midday the sun is to the north. But we talk about sunrise and sunset because we live on the surface of this planet and the planet is spinning. So we experience the sun rising. But relatively speaking, we can say, yeah, the sun rises, but in actuality, it only appears to rise because of the spinning of the earth. The sun is where it is. Of course, it's moving in its own way, but all analogies are partial. But for the sake of this example, that the sun just stays where it is and the earth spins. So it looks like it's rising and setting, and it very reliably does that every day. So the conventional truth is the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. But ultimately, no, it doesn't. The sun is just sitting there and the earth spins, and so that appearance of rising and setting is what we experience because of living on the surface of the planet. That makes sense. So both the relative truth and the absolute truth, they are both real, they're both true, but they're looking at the same situation from a different perspective. So that's why we can say, I am of the nature to age, I am of the nature to sicken, I am of the nature to die. Yes, but then that which is of the nature to age, sicken and die isn't absolutely and completely and truly who and what we are. So there's both the conventional truth and the ultimate truth. So where this becomes important is, and very significant, is, and going back to the first comment of Luang Por Sumedho saying, that I was quoting, saying, changing the paradigm from I'm an unenlightened person who's got to do something now in order to become enlightened in the future. If we take that as a fixed and absolute reality, then the result of that is going to be frustration. If we're casting our efforts in the practice upon, if we're casting that in the mold on the basis of I am a person, and I am unenlightened, and I have got to do something so that I will become enlightened in the future, everything is being cast in the framework of self-view. And so the result of that, that self-view, I am the body, I am the personality, I am a person, if that's the basis, if that's believed in, then that can only lead to dukkha, to dissatisfaction. It can't lead to liberation, no matter how much effort we put in, no matter how sincere we are. If the basis is I am a person who's got to do this in order to become that, then that the result has to be disappointment, suffering, dukkha. So this is why it's helpful to look at what is a person, and what are the assumptions there, and looking at things from that second level of truth. And so, an insight meditation is essential in this. So one of the key qualities in this is called Dhamma Anudhamma Patipada, making that change of perspective, which is practicing Dhamma in accordance with Dhamma, rather than practicing Dhamma in accordance with self-view. So this means, rather than thinking, I'm an unenlightened person who's got to do something now, recognizing that in this moment, there's the experience of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking, that isn't a person, it doesn't belong to a person, but there are these perceptions that are arising, taking shape, and dissolving. That they are aspects of nature. They are part of the way things are. And so that quality of Dhamma Anudhamma Patipada, that is the fourth of the four qualities conducive to stream entry. So again, the stream entry is impossible as long as the practice is based on self-view. So if instead of me practicing the Dhamma so that I will become enlightened in the future, because I've got all these defilements I need to get rid of, I have these spiritual qualities I need to develop and perfect. Instead, if the practice, the intention and effort in the practice of Dhamma is energized and guided by mindfulness and wisdom, rather than by self-view, by the idea of me and mine, then the result of that will be liberation, will be peacefulness. That's why that is one of the qualities that leads to stream entry and to liberation. And so it might seem a little bit blurry there, but isn't it me practicing mindfulness and wisdom? Like, no, that's the point. It's like it's not. I like to highlight how in the Eightfold Path, the second element of the Eightfold Path, Samma Sankappo, right intention, right resolution, there has to be a way that direction can be set, intentions can be made in this life. There can be a goal, a direction that's free of self-view. Otherwise, Samma Sankappo couldn't be a factor of the Eightfold Path. every aspect of the Eightfold Path leads to peace, leads to liberation. So there has to be a way that there's directionality, that we're setting a goal, having an intention, working towards liberation. That direction can be set free of I and me and mine feelings. Similarly, effort, samma vayamo, the sixth of the factors of the Eightfold Path, there has to be a way that we work at the practice. We make effort, that effort can be made free of self-view, free of I and me and mine. So again, it's a bit of a subtle point, but if in our efforts in the practice, if that way of setting direction and working to cultivate the wholesome and to let go of the unwholesome, if that can be free of self-view and free of I and me and mine, and guided by and fueled by mindfulness and wisdom, then we can have a goal. There can be a goal, there can be a direction, there can be a lot of effort being made, but it's not stressful, it's not burdensome, it's not tied up with those feelings of I and me and mine. Rather, that the directionality and the effort leads towards peacefulness, it leads towards liberation, it leads towards a great ease of heart. So I feel this is a very important aspect, and I just did this long world tour, literally around the whole planet, leading retreats in Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, giving talks in Australia, and then leading another retreat in the USA. And kind of every place, I was kind of harping on the same theme, kind of everywhere I was on the planet, because I do feel this is something that is really significant, because there can be enormous effort made with great sincerity and commitment, really wanting to do something with this life to use it to the best effect possible. But because it's being co-opted by self-view, I've got to work hard on my practice, I've got to get rid of my defilements, I've got to develop the paramitas so that I can become enlightened for the benefit of all beings. If everything is cast in the form of, I should, I must, I've got, then regardless of how much effort and sincerity, it's all going to be co-opted by self-view, and the result of that is always going to contain dukkha. It's going to be frustrating and limiting. So finding the way of letting mindfulness and wisdom be the guiding spirit and the kind of empowering force in the practice, free of conceit, free of self-view, I feel that's extraordinarily important. And if that sense of that can be found, then this is really pointing to what the same quality that the Buddha is referring to, that awake, aware quality of the heart, the citta, that knows the five khandhas, knows the world, knows this body, knows this personality, but can't be defined by it. So that, as he said about his own nature, that material form, feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness, whereby someone trying to describe the Tathagata would describe them, that's all been cut off, let go of. The Tathagata, this awake, aware quality of the citta, it can't be defined in terms of the five khandhas, but it's profound, immeasurable, unfathomable, like the great ocean. So just like when we're standing on the seashore, and whether it's the seashore of Brisbane, Australia, or Northern California, same Pacific from different angles, that when you're standing on the seashore, there's a sense of wonderment. There's the sea reaching out to the horizon. You can't see what's below the surface. There's the waves kind of coming in and pounding on the beach. There's energy. There's a quality of infinitude, and there's a sense of wonder. So the Buddha uses this as a way of alluding to that nature of the awake, aware citta that is real, is present, but can't be defined in terms of the five khandhas, in terms of our ordinary everyday perceptions. And so in this respect, it's also interesting to note there's two different verbs to be in Pali. Little sort of sidetrack into Pali grammar here. So that when we say today is Sunday, it's July, this is Amaravati, I am Ajahn Amaro, those verbs to be, this is Sunday, this is Amaravati, I am Ajahn Amaro. You use the verb hoti, H-O-T-I, hoti. So that is the verb to be, referring to time and individuality and the conditioned world. There's the other verb to be is atti, A-T-T-H-I, and that's used to refer to these transcendent, timeless, unborn, undying qualities. So when the Buddha says there is the unborn, the unoriginated, uncreated, unformed, atti bhikkhave ajatang abhutang akatang asankatang, that's atti. So that's a quality of being, a quality of isness that's not tied to identity, to time, to location, to concept, to language, to any structure or form. Profound, immeasurable, unfathomable, like the great ocean. So a number of years ago, I was going along to a number of the teachers. When I was living in America, His Holiness the Dalai Lama would come to the States and give a series of teachings sometimes, and so often myself and the other Sangha members from Abhayagiri Monastery would go along to his teachings, maybe in San Francisco or Oakland or down in Southern California, in Los Angeles or Pasadena, or the last that I went to was in New York City. And so at one of these sessions of the Dalai Lama's teachings, there was this, he would quote from this passage from the famous work by Shantideva called the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. And so this might sound like a bit of a sidetrack, but the reason why I'm talking about it will become apparent. So, in that, so we're Theravadins. So, our ethic is, enlightenment, liberation, ending rebirth as soon as possible. That's our usual thing. That's kind of standard working model for Theravada thinking. To liberate the chitta and stop being reborn ASAP. And so then, in this verse from Shantideva that the Dalai Lama was reciting, it goes, as long as space remains, as long as living beings remain, so too shall I remain to relieve the sufferings of the world. It's a kind of a assertion of the Bodhisattva. As long as space remains, as long as living beings remain, so too shall I remain in order to relieve the sufferings of the world. So then, us being a bunch of Theravadins along at the Dalai Lama's teachings, and reciting this together with 6,000 other people, then people during the breaks or the kind of the sort of pauses in the program, people would say, "Ajahn, how do you relate to that? Are you reciting those words, or are you going quiet when that bit of the program happens?" And so this was kind of in the air, and it was sort of being discussed how we related to that. And I can't pin down exactly when it struck me, but it suddenly, at a certain moment, that's say the aspect of the two levels of truth came to mind, and it also reflecting on the sort of the Bodhisattva path, the Arahant path, and such like, and so that it suddenly struck me that you could see that same verse in a couple of different ways. As long as space remains, as long as living beings remain, so too shall I remain. But if there is the wisdom to recognize space is a construct of perception, space isn't absolutely real, as long as if living beings are seen as not absolutely real, but are seen as empty of intrinsic nature, then what does that say about the me who's going to stick around to be helping all the beings? So that as long as space remains, as long as living beings remain, so I'll remain. But if space and living beings are recognized as being completely empty of intrinsic being, then that says the same thing about this one who's making the statement, if that makes sense. So you got two different. So it was an interesting moment. Like, oh, you can read those same words in two very, very different ways. So. And how the Bodhisattva ethic and the Arahant ethic actually can be seen as being very unified in that as long as there's other beings and me around to help, I'll help. But if the mind sees that living beings are empty of intrinsic nature, space and time also are empty of intrinsic nature, then, that changes the landscape. And then also I remember there's passages in the Vajra Sutra, again from the northern tradition, in the Diamond Cutter of Doubt Sutra, where it says, the Buddha's talking to one of his disciples called Subhuti, and says, Subhuti, living beings are spoken of by the Tathagata as no living beings. Therefore, they are called living beings. I'll say that again, just in case you didn't catch it. So, Subhuti, living beings are spoken of by the Tathagata as no living beings. Therefore, they are called living beings. So, saying beings don't really exist, so we have to designate them into existence in order to talk about them. Again, it's a bit subtle for a warm Sunday afternoon. But I wrote about it in one of my little essays in this book. So, and just in case I forgot the quotation, I brought it along. But so there's an article I wrote in there called "The View from the Center," talking about the northern and southern perspectives, and I quote the same passages in there. And so I felt that was a very helpful way of looking at the person, or what is a living being. And again, the mind that says, but I am a living being, this is me. I'm a person, I'm a woman, I'm a man, I'm British, I'm Sri Lankan, I'm Thai, I'm French, I'm German, I'm Portuguese. I am. Yes and no. We can say, I like to use the example, so we say we're in Hertfordshire. Well, at the moment we're in Hertfordshire, but 50 years ago this was Bedfordshire. The English Sangha Trust bought this property from the Bedford Education Committee, from Bedford County Council, because this was Bedfordshire. And go back another 1,000 years or so, this was the Kingdom of Essex. When this country was divided into 7 kingdoms, so this was the Kingdom of Essex, and then before that there wasn't even a concept of kingdoms. So where are we? Where are we? Hertfordshire is a construct, it's a concept, it's designated into existence. And so that same sentence or that passage from the Vajra Sutra, it's from the chapter called Spoken and Not Spoken in the Vajra Sutra, the Diamond Cutter of Doubt Sutra. Living beings are spoken of by the Tathagata as no living beings, so therefore they are called living beings. So recognizing that there is no absolute entity separate and individual there, we use the convention of saying, I am Ajahn Amaro, this is Sunday, we use our names, we use these labels, these designations for the sake of convenience. So we designate things into existence to get by during our days and to organize our lives more conveniently. But if we take that to be an absolute truth, then we create dukkha. When we recognize this is only a specification, a designation made by the mind for the sake of convenience and communication, then we're keeping things in the context. So that, anyway, I not to be shamelessly promoting my own literature, but if you do want to go back to those particular passages, both the Shantideva and the Vajra Sutra and those things, then they're in that article called The View from the Center. And the book's called Roots and Currents. So then going back to the original question, can a person realize enlightenment? I would say, well, there's no such thing as an enlightened person. From the outside, it might look like that. You say, well, the Buddha was enlightened. Again, in our ordinary everyday speech, from the outside, we can say that a person is enlightened. But from the inside, then I would say, I'm not making any claims to enlightenment myself, but theoretically speaking, so from the inside, there's the awake mind knowing the personal qualities arising and passing away, so that the mind of an arahant isn't conceiving that mind, that experience as a person or belonging to a person. It's the awake mind, which is not personal. It's not female or male, old or young, tall or short, green, blue, purple. It's not located anywhere. That awake, aware quality is knowing the personal experience of sensation, feeling, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking. It's knowing those personal qualities arising and passing away. So that's why I feel that it's a useful thing to contemplate. There's no such thing as an enlightened person. Because from the inside, there's the awake mind, which is completely non-personal, which is totally transcendent. It's aware, it's awake, it's the heart of what is real. But it knows the personal, but it's not identified or entangled or limited by those personal qualities. So and I like to take these kind of statements or these reflections and bring them into the meditation and during the course of the day, over and over again, to take a reflection like, this which knows the person is not a person. Just to challenge that, yeah, but I'm Ajahn Amaro, I'm supposed to be the abbot of this place. But yes and no. This which knows abboting is not an abbot. This which knows the human thing is not a human. Yeah, this which knows the human experience is not human. This which knows the personal isn't a person. So that's challenging to the ego and to our habits of self-view. It gives that, eek, but then what am I? Which can be a bit of a freak out. So safety warning, you know. But it's a useful freak out, I would say. It's challenging to the ego, but simultaneously liberating to the heart. It's like, oh, right, this quality of awake, aware knowing is liberated from these false limitations. That's why we talk about freedom in a world of limitation, in a world of time and gravity and physical limitation. This which knows limitation is not limited. Another of the phrases I like to reflect on and take to heart is the mind is Dhamma, not a person. Again, in one of Lumpur Cha's talks called Dhamma Nature, given the title Dhamma Nature, he makes the statement, Dhamma is nature, nature is Dhamma. And in the Thai language, it's the word for nature, Dhammachat, comes from the Pali Dhamma Jati. Jati means birth, Dhamma means the Dhamma. So Dhamma Jati means born of the Dhamma. So the word for nature in the Thai language is born of the Dhamma. So Lumpur Cha made this kind of statement fairly often, and it's particularly highlighted in that talk, that Dhamma is nature, nature is Dhamma. And so if that's considered, what aspect of this body and this mind is not a part of nature? And you can say, well, my glasses are not natural, Ajahn. They were made in a factory. Yeah, but the factory, every aspect of the factory where your glasses were made, the sand that the glass was made from, the people that work in the factory, the people who built the factory and designed it, and every aspect of it is still part of the natural order in one way, shape, or form. So that, again, just to consider and to reflect, what aspects of the body and mind are not part of nature? The molecules, the atoms, the energies that make up these lives, these bodies, these forms, and every aspect of them, they're all part of the natural order. So we think of my body, my mind, as being me, as separate from everything else. And I was just seeing a newspaper article about how there was a move to encourage dictionaries to include humans in the definition of nature. I thought, so I just saw that today in a news feed. Like, what? How could we not? How did they ever not have humans as part? Well, okay, ignorance. Yeah, avijja paccaya sankhara. So apparently it was the case that nature was defined in dictionaries and encyclopedias as something other than people, but we are nature. You can't. When people say, I like to be out in nature, I tend to think, well, where do you think you are? And there was a one evening when the Buddhist Society Summer School used to take place at High Lee over in Hoddesdon, there'll be these evening Dhamma talks where 120 people gathered for these evening talks. And one evening everyone was sort of spilling out into the summer night after this talk had been given, and there were two people who were standing side by side out by this fountain in the courtyard and looking up at the stars. And one of the people said, "Wouldn't it be amazing? Wouldn't it be amazing to be out there moving through space, just out amongst the stars in the infinity of the universe?" And the other person said to them, "Where do you think you are?" Like, duh. That wouldn't be so rude as to address each other in that way. So I feel this is a very helpful way to rejig our perspectives, to take those kind of reflections to heart. That the citta is Dhamma. The heart, the mind is Dhamma. Its nature. It's not a person. And just to feel the challenge to the ego, like but. Just to challenge the habits and to let the perspective change, and then when that challenge is made, to notice, even if it's just for a second, so on the other side of the freak out or the but, there's something in there that goes, "Oh, yes, ooh, that's interesting." Even if it's just half a second, just pay attention to that in that moment, that sense of, "Oh, right, how could that not be the case?" Because in that moment, the perspective has changed. The mind is seeing with the eye of Dhamma. It's not seeing with the eye of self-view. And also I was reminded, with looking at this theme, of when I was had my 10th rains retreat back in the old days. There was only one kuti, one hut in the forest at Chithurst. The parish council, or the Chichester planning committee in West Sussex was extremely strict, and they wouldn't let us build any kutis in the forest. So there was only one kuti, so we would take it in turns to go and spend time out there. So my 10th rains retreat as a monk, I spent in the forest at Chithurst in the one kuti that was there. This was after three years or so after Amaravati had opened up in 1988. So it was the first time I had sort of substantial solitude for years and years and years, and so that I didn't set out to write a whole bunch of poems, but I ended up being the wordy kind of person that I am. I ended up writing a whole bunch of poems during that rains retreat. And the very first one, I was just recollecting today, the very first thing that I wrote as by way of sort of reflecting on the experience there after 3 or 4 days in the forest, what came to mind was, if I can remember the words, "It's all been turned around. At first there was me realizing the Dhamma, now there's Dhamma realizing the me." So again, that's a little, again, not to be shamelessly promoting my own stuff, but that's also, I think, a helpful phrase to indicate the kind of the shift of view that comes with insight practice. It's that we sit down with, like, here's me practicing the Dhamma, here's me realizing the Dhamma, and then as the practice evolves and as that wisdom clarifies, that quality of awake awareness is freed from the habits of self-view, free from attachment to those conventional truths, then what's experienced is, well, here's the Dhamma realizing the me, that all these different me's, these different personae arising and passing away. There's this awake, aware aspect of the citta, which is an attribute of Dhamma itself. It's an attribute of nature, knowing feelings, thoughts, memories, ideas, emotions, sensations arising, passing away. There's the Dhamma realizing the me. So I offer these thoughts for consideration this afternoon. So please take a breather to have some refreshments. Don't take this as an opportunity to come up and ask me a question. People love to do that. Save your questions for when we have the Dhamma discussion time. And we'll gather back at 3:20. So we have 20 minutes to go and get some tea and refreshments, and then have time for discussion after that. So please feel free to ask your questions. There's some microphones, so it would be helpful if people can use those to ask your questions so everyone can hear what is being asked. So please, anything that would be useful, particularly with respect to the theme of today. There you go.
Hello Ajahn, thank you for the talk. So I'm going to try and ask a question. My vocabulary may fall short or get slightly confused, so I'm going to try my best to ask what I'm trying to conceive. So all this... Okay, sorry. We are talking about how a being, a person, cannot become enlightened. We go through life with this sense of I consciousness, and then there is the realization that I is an illusion, but not here, and then Dhamma is... Oh, look, this is where the vocabulary starts falling short. So there's the inner experience of an enlightened being or Tathagata, and there's the experience of that being from the outside, by the world. So that being will still be speaking with I, will still be interacting with the world from the concept of separation, but without a sense of I. And this is where my brain fries.
Well, I wouldn't say it's without a sense of I. It's using the I words and personal pronouns like she, we, he, they, you, but without confusion about them. So in the Buddha's time, people asked him about that, saying, if all Dhammas are not self, why are you saying this person or that person, or I, you, we, they, and so on. And then that's the answer that he gives, is that the Tathagata uses those figures of speech without delusion about them. They're just for the means of communication, for convenience.
I guess the deeper question is, coming back to that idea of the fire, does something happen to the I? Does this I just disintegrate, this lived experience of me, mine, separate, or is it sort of kept there like a pet?
Well, it's a good question. It's not in the Pali canon, but it is quoted often in Buddhist context. I think it's somewhere in the commentarial literature, where it describes somebody walking along through the grass, and they see a circular shape on the path, and they it's a snake, and so they feel afraid, and then they look more closely, and they realize, oh, it's not a snake, it's a coil of rope. So then the question is, what happened to the snake when the coil of rope was recognized? Nothing happened to the snake because there never was one. So that that's in a way that's the crux of it, is that it feels like there's this moi, this special me that is kind of unique and perfect. And I know a lot of Western culture and global culture revolves around that. But I think that's part of the kind of magnificent insight of the Buddha, is that seeing through that is no loss.
It's funny how difficult it is for something that doesn't exist to accept that it isn't real. Thank you.
So, but also that just using that kind of a question, what happened to the snake when the coil of rope was recognized? And I was at a talk, actually, Tsoknyi Rinpoche used that example, and then the translator, this is a Tibetan Lama, was using that example in his talk, and the translator said, "Excuse me, Rinpoche, can I say something?" Very unusual for the translator to step out of translator mode to be speaking to the group, and so Rinpoche said, "Yeah, go ahead." He said, "The other day I was walking through the grass, and I thought it was a coil of rope, and it wasn't. It was a snake." So it was, okay, sometimes that can happen. So does that answer your question?
As much as I think it's possible to until the experience comes. Thank you.
So please, any other questions, thoughts? Yes, you do. Otherwise, people can't hear. Thank you.
Thank you. You were talking about the Diamond Sutra just now, the northern traditions, because I read the Diamond Kata Sutra as well as the Heart Sutra, and in the Diamond Kata Sutra it says in Chinese, 无我相, 无人相, 无众生相. That means there's no I, there's no human, there's no being. So there's the emptiness is there. It talks about that. So and that also is related to Heart Sutra. In the Heart Sutra, it says form is emptiness, emptiness is form. They're quite related in that sense. That was by Amaravati Buddhist Monastery, the Heart Sutra. And I think in that sense, there is this emptiness. I mean, I'm just sharing what little bit, but you can correct me, please, if I say it wrongly. Because whatever form, it is empty by itself. Just what the Dalai Lama said. It's all dependent origination. It doesn't exist by itself. It depends on factors, conditions to manifest. We are all dependent origination. So in that sense, we're empty by itself. Because we do not, that thing does not exist. It depends on other factors that manifest. So through my understanding, that emptiness, that no I, that no me, because I don't exist, because there must be conditions, some like forms. Because in a Heart Sutra, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. It's very difficult to understand that. It's very, very conceptual. But when we break it down, it's quite easy to understand because nothing exists by itself. Even a chair, the chair exists. If we say that the chair doesn't exist, then it's there. But it doesn't exist by itself. It is empty because it has got original dependent nature. Am I right?
I would say essentially, what you have in the Pali Canon, they don't have exactly the same expression, but it's very, very similar. So one of the key teachings of the Buddha on emptiness and the five khandhas is called the lump of foam. And it's he was walking beside the river Ganga at a place called Ayutthaya. In the current times, and there was a lump of foam floating on the surface of the river. And he said, Rupa, material form, is like that lump of foam on the river. So there's a shape, but no essence. And then for the other five khandhas, he uses a similar kind of languaging. So then he said, so the Rupa is like that lump of foam. There's a shape, but your hand would go straight through it. There's nothing solid there. Then he says, Vedana, like when rain falls onto a pond in the rainy season, and then a big raindrop hits the surface of the water, you get a bubble, like a spherical shape forms. That there's a shape, but it's very say fragile. It doesn't last very long, and it's just there for a moment. It's there, but there's nothing solid. And then perception, he says, is like a mirage. Like in the desert, you see a hazy image of form. You can see the shape, but there's nothing solid there. And then sankhara, he compares to the sheaf of leaves of a banana plant, a plantain. That there's no heartwood, there's no trunk. You peel away the leaves, there's no trunk. And there's a form, but no essence. And then the last one, consciousness, vijnana, he says is like a conjuring trick. Like a conjurer performs a magical trick. It looks like it's magic, but really it's just an illusion. There's nothing truly magical there. It's an appearance. So that's the kind of mode that he uses to describe or to convey the principle of sunyata, emptiness, is there's a shape, there's a form, but nothing solid there. And so that's very much like what you find in the world of physics also. Just the atoms that make up our bodies are mostly space. And that the what we call solid is just compacted forms of energy that are experienced as solid. So this is a solid thing, but it's only solid to my hand. If I was a neutrino, I would go straight through this without slowing down, because that a neutrino is a particle, but it has no mass, and it's not, and they just pass through the earth. You have something like 60 billion neutrinos passing through every square centimeter of our skin every second. We can't feel them; they're zooming through. As far as I understand the popular science books that I read. So what's solid? It's solid because of the interaction. So it's, like you say, it's dependent. Our human scale of things, again, talking about popular science books. So a protons are very, very stable, relatively speaking. So I think it was Andrei Sakharov, the physicist, worked out that the half-life of a proton is at least 10 to the 37 years. That's one with 37 zeros after it. At least for a proton to decay. But so, wow, it's a really, really, really long time. Is it? Compared to what? Compared to a human lifespan, 10 to the 37 years is a really long time. Compared to the projected heat death of the universe, it's not much. So, 10 to the 37 years, is that a long time or a short time? So, we get used to measuring things from our human scale, and we say, this is solid, or this is real, this is a person, this is substantial, because of the position that they are experienced from. And so, another of the Buddha's teachings I like to contemplate, he says that passion, raga, dosa, and moha, passion, aversion, and delusion, they are makers of measurement, they are makers of signs, they're makers of substantiality. Because of the habits of mind, we take our ways of naming things and measuring things as absolutely real and solid. But those are all dependently arisen. There's no solid, absolute thing there can't be. So we live in the world of appearances, and some of them are extremely convincing. But I think it was, again, quoting scientists, I think Albert Einstein said, time is an extremely persistent illusion. So that it looks like time is something very, very reliable and definite, but it's a very persistent, I might be misquoting him, but something like that. Time is a very persistent illusion. Gravity similarly. Yeah. So the Buddha's approach is, rather than going into all the detail, it's just that remembering to challenge our habitual judgments and to recognize this is the seeming of things, this is the appearance of things. It's not an absolute reality. So the insight into emptiness is not a negation, it's not a wiping out of all the forms, or saying none of the forms matter. Otherwise, it would contradict all the laws of nature, and also sila and skillful conduct, what's wholesome and unwholesome. So the forms do interact with each other. You know, if I started swearing at you, it would cause great disturbance and probably have an effect on the future Sunday afternoon talks at Amaravati. So I won't do that. So that the forms, they have an effect. But, and so they interact with each other, and so that there are the forms. So the Buddha's teaching is not a nihilistic or not a rejection of that, but saying that those forms, they are intrinsically empty, but they interact with each other. The functioning of the material world, earth, water, fire, and wind, there are laws that they function by in relationship to each other, yes. And there are things that we can say and do that bring about benefit and wholesomeness in others, and things that we can say and do that bring about harm. They're not absolute qualities, but on the relative plane, that's the result. So the Buddha functioned very, very deliberately on the level of conventional truth and ultimate truth. And what I was saying today was that if we just stay on keep our attention focused just on the level of relative truth, then we're always going to create false limitation, and liberation is really impossible. So, but if we bear in mind that ultimate truth level that there are, you know, living beings. There are the Tathagata says that there are no living beings. That's why they're called living beings. That if we keep in mind that these are conventional forms and agreements, then it doesn't mean that we go against all convention and dismiss the laws of the physical reality, but rather there's a respecting of those, but not taking them to be anything absolute or substantial. And so that, in a way, answering the question of the talk, can a person realize enlightenment? I would say, rather than the answer being, well, yes, the answer is, well, no. But the enlightened mind can realize the nature of a person. And that, so if you flip it around, then the answer is yes. The awake mind can realize the person as it arises and passes. So that very simply, moment by moment, just that recognition, and where mindfulness and wisdom is really functions most effectively, is to recollect this is a seeming, this is the appearance of things. It's like in this moment it's like this. This is the seeming of it. It's not an absolute reality. And holding it in that perspective, then the mind, the heart, is able to attune to the time, the place, the situation, the physical reality, and the relationships that are there, and is able to respond in each moment in a skillful way that brings benefit for as many beings as possible. That's how I see it working.
I think at the end of the Dhamma Sutra, the Buddha did tell Sariputta, he says that, everything is a dream, it's a bubble. I like that.
Is a dream or a bubble? Yes.
Yeah, he says everything is a dream and a bubble. So he has a verse, beautiful. Nice. It's translated in English. But
yes, there's a close relationship between the Heart Sutra and then that teaching of the lump of foam. There's parallels between those two. You don't have people will say, "Oh, the Buddha said life is a dream." Well, you never actually find the Buddha saying that in the Pali Canon. That you don't have, at least as far as I know, you don't have those words. But it's certainly in the northern tradition, then that languaging is used. So please, any other questions?
Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much for the talk. My question is actually kind of related to the question Ming asked, in the sense that for me, dependent origination is a very big inspiration, and also these words from the sutta, like consciousness or reality is like a magic trick. And I just wonder if you use the words awake awareness, how this fits into this theory of dependent origination. So is awareness part of this dependent origination, or is it outside of it? Does this make sense, this question?
Yes, perfectly.
Yeah.
If there is vijja, awakened awareness, rather than avijja, then that whole causal chain doesn't kick off. So that in Venerable Payutto's book, Dependent Origination, there's a very helpful little section close to the back of the book called A Problem with the Word Nirodha. So I recommend reading that. We also reprinted that section in the book The Island that I put together with Lumpur Pasano. Because Nirodha doesn't just mean the ending of a thing that has begun, it also means the non-arising, the restraining or the checking of something. So when in Paticca Samuppada, the upada side of it is called with the grain, and then the Nirodha side is against the grain, the patiloma and the anuloma and the patiloma. So when we recite dependent origination, which a couple of these retreats I just led were both on, the one in Thailand and the one in the States were both on dependent origination. So it's a thoroughly worked theme recently in my mind. So when you get to the second half, after the arising half, the anuloma, you have sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. That's where it ends up. Then avijjaya taveva asesa viraga nirodha, with the complete ending of avijja. When there is vijja rather than avijja, then sankhara nirodha. There is a non-arising of sankhara. Sankhara nirodha then leads to the non-arising of vijnana, namarupa, salayata, pasavedana, tanha, upadana bhava, etc. Jati. So that whole causal process does not arise in that way if there is awareness. So that the more the mind can sustain that quality of awakened awareness, the vijja dhatu, the element of awareness, then the causes for dukkha are not created. So there's a teaching in the book of the Tens, in the numerical discourses, sutta number 58, if I remember correctly, where it's kind of that causal process of perception, feeling and perception, when there is vijja rather than avijja. So it starts off by saying, rooted in interest are all things. Chanda mula, chanda is interest. Rooted in interest are all things, born of attention, manasikara, are all things, arising from contact, passa, are all things, diverging into feelings, are all things, vedana samosarana. So you get up to vedana, so that, yes, there's the perceptual process, interest, attention, contact, the mind locks onto a particular sound or a feeling or a thought or an emotion, taste. But then, up to Vedana, then it changes. Then it says, headed by concentration, dominated by mindfulness, surmounted by wisdom, samadhi, sati, panya. So headed by concentration are all things, dominated by mindfulness are all things, surmounted by wisdom are all things, yielding deliverance, vimutti, as their essence are all things. Merging in the deathless, amatogada, merging in the deathless are all things, terminating in nibbana are all things. So, if there's vijja, then there's still the process of perception and feeling, but then because of mindfulness, because of concentration, mindfulness and wisdom, then any feeling, whether it's blissful deliciousness or agonizing pain or anything in between, that Vedana will lead to liberation, to merging in the deathless, and to Nibbana, rather than to Sokha Parideva Dukkha Domanassa Upayasa, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. So that, again, you can look that up, Sutta 58 in the Book of the Tens, is where that's all spelled out.
Thanks for the answer, and it's a really enlightening answer, so thank you very much. Yeah.
So in much of Lumpur Sumedho's teaching, I would say that's the essence of what he's teaching is be awake, embody that quality of vijja, and that's the essence of what he's kind of every Dhamma talk since about 1991, the last 30 plus years has been be awake and be that wakefulness, and that don't let the whole avijja paccaya sankara process arise, and that's the message he's been putting across, and I would say embodying this all through this time, and that's a capacity that we have. It takes a lot of mindfulness and commitment and effort to really embody that, but that's really his. I would say is the essence of his message is embodying that quality of awareness, and then also trusting in awareness is another way he expresses that. Trust in awareness.
Thanks.
So, there's a gentleman in the grey t-shirt.
Thank you very much. The first part really is the 5 hindrances that they, in recent times, have been incredibly helpful, because it allows you to, rather than getting absorbed in a story, you can go back and label it and see which hindrance it is, and then go back to seeing it's just a thought and it lacks inherent existence. So that's really helpful. But that links to my question in relation to everything lacking inherent existence and everything being present. So everything is, there's no past and no future. So how does that link into tradition and things like tradition? And how does it link, obviously, other things in human structures that we have, the conventional nature of things? And also, how does that link into the conditioning and the unconditioned? And also, ultimately, the global problems that we face, like climate change. So how, when we clearly see the truth that everything lacks inherent existence, everything is empty and is like a dream, and there is no time, there is just the present. How do we link that to those things I've just mentioned?
So we've got 10 minutes to cover all of that.
Thank you very much, thank you.
So just to pick up a few of those. So conventions, there's a pair of qualities that go together: emptiness, sunyata, and suchness, tatata. So they're a pair, really, I would say. And Ajahn Buddhadasa talked about them as being equally valid characteristics of existence, like anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, not self. Then sunyata and tatata, emptiness and suchness, are also aspects of all things, intrinsic aspects of all things. So the empty quality is saying no to the 5 khandhas being solid and substantial. The suchness is saying yes to the ultimate reality. So know that the 5 khandhas are empty, they're void of intrinsic substance, and yes, the Dhamma is real. So they have a no and a yes as the ways of relating to the present experience. There's one way of thinking about that, or using those words. So then conventions, I think they work best when we realize that they're empty. So Lumpur Cha, there's some of his recorded Dhamma teachings where he's literally sitting up on the Dhamma seat with a hall full of people saying, there are no monks here, there are no nuns, there are no women, there are no men. These are just sankharas, these are just empty formations. And then you can almost hear the wheels turning, like, no monks, no nuns, what's he talking about? He's actually a monk literally sitting on the Dhamma seat, saying there are no monks here. I think, well, how can he say that? But that's, from that perspective, that's a meaningful and true statement. These are, so that when conventions are recognized as empty of intrinsic substance, then we can use them most skillfully when we think that they're absolutely real. I think, no, ordination is an absolute condition in the universe. Being a monastic is a permanent, absolute thing. Like, well, then we've just lost the Dhamma. But it can only be a convention. It's a human agreement, just like the way that we write, the configuration of marks on a piece of paper or a screen. We say these are letters. I can't read Chinese characters. I can read about 3 of them, but the other 5,000 I can't. But English letters, the Roman alphabet. Oh yeah, totally familiar. If you haven't grown up with the Roman alphabet, then what do these marks mean? So, if we think, no, that is the letter H. It is the letter H. That's what it is. It's an H. It is. Well, yes and no. It's like some marks in a configuration, and we call it a letter H because of our human agreements. So that some of our agreements have beneficial results, some of them have neutral results, some of them have destructive results. But a convention can only be a human agreement to regard certain things in particular ways, and then also taking into account the moral quality of an action, so that I can say that catching fish is part of my cultural heritage, and therefore it's totally moral to catch fish and eat them. I might hold that as a view. To the fish, it's still being pulled out of the water and dying painfully. It's like, well, I might have my version as a human being who likes to go fishing, but the fish doesn't know that. So there's an impact of our views and our conventions that is having its effect on the other living beings and on the environment. Yeah, speaking of the environmental crisis, along with conventions being empty, going back to what I was saying to our friend earlier, there's the way that the natural world operates, the 4 elements and the natural world. There are certain effects that those forms have upon each other. At sea level, water will boil at 100. Pure water will boil at 100 degrees. If you're at a certain altitude, it will boil at 80 degrees. That's the way the natural order works. You can't just decide for it to be different. You can't just decide water will boil at 200 degrees and have those degrees mean the same things. No, it won't. So there's in a way, the aspect of mindfulness and wisdom is both recognizing the empty nature of conventions and also the patterning of the natural order, how things work in nature. So people like Lumpur Sumedho, Lumpur Cha, the kind of great spiritual masters, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and people, there's a great sense of practicality and attunement to human nature, to character, to the physical world, that's part of their mindfulness. It's not like spaced out or ignoring the functioning of the material world or society's values. There's an acute attunement to how things affect people and how nature operates. And so that's a part of the skillful use of conventions is you see their empty nature, but you're also seeing how they can be applied in relationship to the world as it functions according to its natural laws. So, but the mind that can recognize that conventions are human agreements, then the more that can be done, then we save ourselves a lot of grief. And we also find a lot of compassion for other beings, because when we recognize others who are lost in their commitment, so this is important, this is right, that's wrong, this is beautiful, that's ugly, it should be this way, it shouldn't be that way, then if there's a genuine seeing into the nature of conventions and attachment to opinions and views, then we find a lot of empathy. You can see, okay, that person's that's really important to them. That's you can't just pretend that's not there. I don't necessarily feel that myself, but it's real for them. So we're able to be, there's a heart of compassion and empathy for others, whereas if we're attached to our own conventional system and our own sets of rights and wrongs, but this is right, this is good, and it should be this way, and it shouldn't be that way, then we harden our heart in relationship to other beings. I would say that is a natural part of my attachment to my view and my conventional forms. Like if I think Theravada Buddhism is right, Mahayana Buddhism is wrong, then Venerable Holger Yeshe would be very uncomfortable here. So he's very welcome as a member of the Sangha from the northern tradition here for the Rains Retreat. But if he had the sense that Ajahn Amaro thinks Mahayana Buddhism or Northern Buddhism is wrong, we're right, and that wrongness is an absolute, it'll be very uncomfortable. But if he recognizes, this is a set of conventions that they use, and that that this is what they do, this is how they do it, and I'm very welcome here. People are very friendly, very respectful. Okay, I can be here. So that then there's an empathy that comes with a kind of a attitude of non-grasping at conventions. So we're not dismissing conventions or defying them, but recognizing their empty nature. So someone like Ajahn Chah was very, very, very good at that. He was very alert to how easily the mind attaches to conventions and it imbues them with false value, but also using conventions. So he was a very orthodox monk, kind of capital O, orthodox, not Christian orthodox, but very by the book, and so extremely rigorous. But also at the same time, he would sit up on the Dhamma seat and say, "There are no monks here," and that's not the way you should put your shoulder bag down. That's not the way you should wear your robe. You should do it like this, not like that. But there aren't any monks here. So that, and without any kind of hypocrisy, but just recognizing the skillful attitude towards conventions, so that you treat them with sincerity and care, but you also recognize that they're empty at the same time.
Very profound, thank you very much. I suppose the library represents that, the fact you go to the Theravada library and it's got everything in there, from Christianity to Islam to Sufism. I think that's a very genuine thing to do, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Very good. Well, 4 o'clock has come around, so let's draw things to a close. Next week, Lumpur Sumedho will be offering reflections on 40 years of the deathless realm, time and timelessness coming together. How can the deathless have 40 years associated with it? So anyway, so that will be speaking of conventions, at 3 o'clock, not 2 o'clock. So next Sunday, the Sunday afternoon talk will be at 3, and Lumpur will be offering those reflections on 40 years of deathlessness. And also we'll have copies of the book, Time and Timelessness, 40 Years of Amaravati, to be distributed. So please do come along if you can. Go well.